Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. So this event is in lieu of a normal book launch that we normally have, and we are now in a rented studio in Chelsea. So I guess, first of all, do you want to say hello to everybody? And I know that everybody's been wanting to hear your voice.
Okay, which voice?
That is, well, I mean, that's, I think, something that's very interesting about you. You know, how would you say that Tanqueray's voice is different than Stephanie's voice?
Stephanie's voice is very fast. I don't, Stephanie's voice is my voice, but for stage and when I've done a lot of TV and whatever, I always use the Tanqueray voice. And I talk very slow and sensual. And I learned that years ago because when I used to perform as Tanqueray, I wrote for a magazine, I won't mention it, an adult magazine, which I never did all those things. And whenever I worked on the road, they'd send enough copies to last for the week. And guys would say, "You didn't write this." And I'm going, "Yes, I did." And there was a porn star that I made all her wardrobe and stuff, and she was a friend, Vanessa Del Rio. And I went backstage and I said, "Vanessa, they don't believe that I wrote this." She goes, "Steph, you talk too fast. You have to wear lots of red lipstick, lip gloss, and slow your voice down, and breathe very heavy so you go in and out and go, 'Yeah, can I help you? What would you?'" And once I did that, these guys that used to come to the show would believe that I actually was that.
That's something that I think we've kind of touched on a little bit. I think so much of the story was about kind of this difference between, Stephanie and, Tanqueray. Do you feel now that, Tanqueray is such a famous name and the story is so famous, do you feel like you're going to have to kind of be on at all times?
I'm not on at all times anymore. I think that's before we started wearing the mask, people would approach me and want to have a conversation with me. And they couldn't believe that I'm just talking regular. I don't have to talk with that yes, no, whatever. And it's great that I can be Stephanie for a change. Because if you read, well, you know this, if you read my history, I've always had to invent a character. And I just want to be Stephanie.
So you being a jukebox of stories and having gone through all of these things and had all these very interesting experiences. Can you tell me a little bit about the difficulties of, getting older, especially recently, when your mobility was affected and you weren't able to get out very much? I mean, what was it like for you psychologically to transition from this wild life with these crazy characters around you all of the time, all of these crazy things happening that only happen to you, to being in, a situation that kind of forced you to be isolated?
I think I told you about the Bible with the hair in it, and Yolanda said that that was my guardian angel. My guardian angel was, "You have COVID now." I am glad I am stuck in the house.
Well, you don't have COVID.
No. I mean, no.
My guardian angel said you had COVID now.
I've been tested.
Yeah.
But normally I would have been out in the street. I would have been, going places. And it's a blessing because I've been in the house. Am I bored to death? Yes. But I'm glad I don't have to go to the house every day. I'm glad for the help that you've provided for me to, for people to do things for me. And to me, it's my guardian angel. I shouldn't have been in the street because who knew what would have happened?
What has this experience been like from the moment that we've met on the street? What has it been like from your point of view?
You're the craziest person I've met.
Thank
you. And let me tell you, I think we understand each other. I can say anything to you and you don't judge me. I can say anything on Humans in New York and people don't judge me. I tell the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'll tell about the good times, the bad times, and whatever. And I think that's why people relate to me.
Well, start with...
And then you write it, and it's like amazing.
So, I think something that people are probably very interested in is like, so everybody's seen you on the blog. They've seen your picture and your stories, and they've seen the tens of thousands of comments that it's generated and the millions of likes or whatever it is. I think it'd be interesting to know the story from your point of view, not online, but just as starting with you just kind of walking down the street and running into me. And
I'm walking down the street. I had on this hat, which I made, but I had on another coat that I made. And he said, "I like your outfit." And I said, "Thank you." And he's got on shorts. I swear, I don't know how short they were, but they were shorts. It was like 30-something degrees. And he's got on a T-shirt with short sleeves. And I said, "I don't mean to seem racist, but why do you white people don't want to put on your clothes when it's cold?" So he starts laughing, and then he shows me something on his cell phone. I really couldn't read it because I didn't have my glasses on. And he goes, "Can I interview you?" I was having a bad day because I get a lot of depression and stuff. In fact, years ago, I knew something was wrong. I went to Bellevue. When they studied me for a month, they couldn't believe that I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I didn't do all the things. They wanted to give me free medicine and free treatment if they could study me. I said no, because I don't get along with women, and that goes back to my childhood. But with you, I was having a bad day, which doesn't happen every day. And I told you stuff I have never told anyone. I don't know why. You said, "Can I go home and get my, whatever you had to get?" And I was just going on and on and on about things that had happened to me in my childhood and whatever. And you were listening. And I get upstairs and I go, "Wow, if I had gone to a shrink, that would have been $150. And when I got upstairs, I felt a lot better. But then when I saw what was going on, people started that know me, said, "Oh, you're on here." I said, "What the heck is that?" And then I went on and I saw who you were. And then you contacted me because you want to talk to me more. I never take myself serious in anything I do, but you have been the best thing that ever happened to me. And I even brought it up online. The reason why I dropped out of college, and I won't say which one, was because of sexual harassment, that if I go to this teacher's house and be nice to him, we all know what that means. This was in the 60s. Register for his class. I don't have to show up. He'll put me through with the best, highest marked. I dropped out. All I needed was my pattern making. I used to do plus size lingerie. Somebody was going to I met somebody in fact, Wilton's Bar. They all know what I do. And I told them I make plus size lingerie. And this was like 15, 20 years ago. So he goes, "We back new designers." Right away I said, "Come to my office." I said, "What do I owe you?" And he goes, "Nothing, I'm serious." I go to this office. They sent me to a Rockefeller's house, who was the big guy. He goes, "I have problems getting clothes. They're all custom made." He goes, "Right now it's Latinos and ethnic people that are plus size." He goes, "In 20 years, you're going to see white women plus size. I'm going to put $2 million behind you." He didn't hit on me. It was really cool. I never saw a house like this in my life. It was off Fifth Avenue. I was just like, ah. I go back, and the guy that brought me in said that I didn't owe him anything. He has to leave because he's the one in China that has to stay in the factory 25 days out of the month, or else it comes back messed up.
So what was I guess that first moment, like when you were kind of on the blog, what was going through your head? You said people were kind of approaching you and people were, saying that they'd seen you. Like, what was that like for you?
It was funny because I don't take myself serious in anything I do. I appreciated the fact that people were telling me, especially younger people, that they've had a hard life. They've made some mistakes whether they drank or did pot or whatever. But reading my story gave them the courage to try to correct their bad habits and go forward and make the best out of life. That made me feel really good.
What was it like for you meeting, like when we met at the diner, these multiple times a week, and kind of were going back through your past and going back through your story? What was that?
Well, sometimes I go home and think about it and get depressed, but then I go, I can talk to him and he doesn't judge me. I'm telling you, hey, I'm 76, darling. I've met all kinds of guys, had all kinds of offers. They're judgmental. They don't want to, my nickname is Stevie, as you know. They don't want to know Stevie, they want to know Tanqueray. I've never been Tanqueray. That's a character I created. Everything, I know I don't play well with others because I don't smoke, I don't drink. I'm not going to go with some guy for some bucks. And if you want to have friends, especially female friends, you have to do what they do. And I'm not doing it. And then even lately, I had friends that were like a lot younger than me because we could go to clubs and I could get into VIP rooms and get everything for free. The minute they get a boyfriend, they can't go shopping with me anymore. They can't do this. They can't do that.
So you said it was like a lot of times you'd go home after we kind of were talking, because I know we talked about some tough stuff,
Yeah,
a lot of stuff.
And I take my Zoloft. I can call my doctor and tell him when I'm tanking.
So if it made you like,
But it was good though.
That's what I mean.
It was
like
good.
You said that it made you sad, but in what ways was it good?
Because I'm confronting myself, and I still don't. You know what I mean? I'm dealing with a lot of negative stuff that happened in my life, and I'm dealing with it a lot better.
You're confronting yourself. What do you mean?
Because some things I never even thought about. I knew that I was depressed, and I have delayed stress syndrome, which that's what they had said at Bellevue. But I'm in control of it now. Talking to you and telling the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you not judging me, has been fabulous.
What is something you learned about yourself through this process?
That I can get through anything. That I can have memories and it doesn't bother me. You've changed my life. You don't realize how much you've changed my life. And you've changed other people's lives because I read what people say. And I've got all these people now that like me and whatever. It's great, but I don't take myself serious. I will always be Stephanie or Stevie. Any character I have made up is because I needed to survive.
So we got to that place where we trusted each other, and you would allow me to confront you, and we could get to kind of these deep things that maybe you hadn't admitted to other people, or maybe that you hadn't admitted to yourself. And then, as part of the process, this becomes part of the narrative that gets shared with millions and millions of people. I mean, the story went incredibly viral, whatever. So can you tell me what the experience was like reading about your kind of innermost thoughts, innermost insecurities, innermost fears, and putting those on the stage in the same way that Tanqueray would be on the stage, but this is the part of you that had always been hidden?
I read the comments, and like I said, I don't read them anymore because one day I was online for 4 hours and not doing what I'm supposed to do. So I go read, like a lot of times you'll call me and say, did you read this? I'll go look for it, but I don't go on every day because what happens is I get caught up in all the people and whatever, and I don't do what I'm supposed to be doing. But you have literally changed my life. And you have been the first person that hasn't like, hey, will you do me a favor? And you know what a favor is. I think about you, I think about your wife, I think about your beautiful daughter, and I can't say this to your wife. She doesn't know how lucky she is to have a guy like you. Because somebody else is going to be,
Stop it.
It's true. Guys don't exist like you. And I think it's, especially in this world, I think it's just, you're the most amazing person. And then also, meeting my son because of you that I hadn't seen in years because of a misunderstanding. And I've seen him like 3 or 4 times in the last week. Even people said it's the first time they seen me smile. I hadn't seen Mitch, and I don't know when, because he thought I was mad at him, and I told you what happened. It's wonderful.
what are some of your worries about the future? I mean, do you think that that this is just going to be a Band-Aid, and that when the attention dies down and, the internet moves on like the internet always moves on, do you fear that you're going to go back to a dark place?
No. Mm-mm. Because I got backup. Because of the trust fund you did for me. I will always do something else. As soon as the economy gets better, I'll be making adult baby clothes again. But right now, guys are saying, I can't afford it, I lost my job. It will come back.
Stephanie, one thing I have absolutely no doubt that you're going to do is you're going to figure out a business, or you're going to figure out a hustle, or
it's going to be branded under Tanqueray.
I know. That's the part of you that I have zero doubts about, of you landing on your feet. But we talked about confronting yourself and, confronting traumas from your past, and, confronting things that, dark places that you went back to maybe in our conversations that you hadn't before. And I can talk about this because, some of them you've shared just with me, but some of them you shared with 20 million people. There is a lot of sadness and trauma in your past. What do you worry about in terms of, do you think that you've gotten to a place now where you're past that? Do you worry about it coming back? Because, you talked about feeling like you didn't exist. That's one thing you said to me a lot, is that there were times when you felt like you don't exist. Do you ever...
You mean Stephanie?
Yeah. You said...
I told you my last marriage, we're saying our wedding vows, and when it was over, he whispered in my ear, I always wanted to marry somebody in the adult industry. I'm not Tanqueray, and I'll never be Tanqueray. I want to build a brand that's Tanqueray. I probably will start my burlesque agency again, but the old school, when the girls had costumes and stuff like that. I'd like to do that again. Because this new burlesque, they dance for 6 minutes. In my day, you had to dance for 20. You had a costume of at least 11 pieces. All the Wall Street firms were, in the upper scale, were my accounts. And I probably will do that again. I have a girl that looks exactly like Marilyn Monroe in makeup. I want to have a cake where if it's somebody's birthday party, like a bunch of money people, that she can jump out of the cake and sing happy birthday like Marilyn Monroe did. There's a lot of things I want to do that nobody's doing.
Are you worried about feeling lonely again, even though 20 million people know your story?
Not really.
Good.
Not really. It's funny. I order from, maybe that's why they went out of business. I order from Railline, and I order dinner, and I get dessert for free. It's
like if we were to teleport back in time, okay, to those very first few meetings that we had at the diner, all right, and I imagine you kind of had your expectations of what this is going to look like, what kind of story this guy is going to write. How was it different in its final form than
you told exactly about how I felt. You knew me better than anybody, and when you wrote, it was exactly like me writing something, and you didn't change anything, and I love that about you.
I think maybe one last thing that people would like to know is what's next for you? What do you want thinking about the next 10 years of your life, describe the perfect next 10 years of your life for you.
Getting rid of this so I can walk. Mm-hmm. Even if I have to walk with the cane, that's cool. I prefer to be able to walk this way. My ex-boyfriend might come back in my life. I don't really know. We talk, mm-hmm. but there was a lot of things going on with that. The next thing in my life, we know we can't bring Carmine back, and I think about that all the time. And since we've traveled and we saw where he's buried, I have dreams about him, and I wake up crying. I can't control that. But that was the only person that knew Stephanie and knew Tanqueray. And I like being Tanqueray. Before the mask, I got guys want to take me out for a drink. And I'll go, how old are you? I'm 37. Honey, I'm old enough to be your great-grandmother. No. But I don't, like I said, I don't take myself serious. Even when I was Tanqueray, I don't take myself serious.
So what kind of guy do you want? You want to put out a little pitch? You never know who's watching.
There's certain requirements I like. I ain't gonna put them up on.
All right, we'll let that.
We don't want to go into that way.
All right, so we will let that lie. Okay, so I guess at some point, being that this is officially my book launch, where we're supposed to, or I guess we're supposed to talk about my book, which is there, and the work a little bit. So this is a little bit more comfortable territory for me, and I don't have to be in like TV host mode. All right, so I know you have a list of questions. Oh, look, there it is. Okay, and so you can pick whichever of those you want. You can ask them all.
Can I ask you some questions?
You can go ahead and ask
me.
Do
I talk like Tanqueray? Do I talk like Stephanie?
You can talk however. You go ahead and do your Tanqueray voice. Really draw those questions out in that Tanqueray voice.
What was it like to tell my story?
So this was, I think, a lot of people are saying, I'll do the Trump thing, a lot of people are saying that it was the best thing that I've ever done. I mean, it was certainly the story that I worked the hardest on. I think a huge thing for me was grappling with the uncertainty of whether, because I had a lot of experience telling stories in small thank you, in small bursts, and it started, like when I first started, like I don't know how far back you've gone in Humans in New York, I know you were educating yourself as we went along, but when I first started doing Humans of New York, it was just like, I would meet somebody, I would speak with them for 2 minutes, I would include a single quote,
right,
and then that would be the caption. And I did this for years. And then as time went on, the interviews got longer and longer, where I would sit with somebody on the street and I would talk with them for, starting 10 minutes, then went to 20, then went to 30, to now I'll sometimes spend an hour and a half to 2 hours with somebody on the streets. And it grew much more into, here's an interesting photo with a little story attached, to here is a deep interview in a longer story about some random person that I met on the street. And during that entire time, this is over a course of 10 years, I think the work was constantly pushing up against the barriers of what social media was capable of. And, also what is known as best practices on social media. Yeah. Like I remember one time I interviewed like a social media consultant. I just randomly stopped him on the street, and he's like, "Oh, what's your story?" And he kind of looked at my Instagram, and this was back when the stories were shorter. He goes, "Oh, you need to shorten these down. Like this doesn't work. It's got to be snappy on social media. It's got to be snappy on social media." Whereas in Humans of New York did something that people, that not many people were doing on social media, right, which was asking for people's time.
Right.
It takes a couple minutes to consume a Humans of New York story these days.
Yeah.
And it's kind of counterintuitive to what normally works on social media. And then we have You, which was a 12,000 word story. And, the entire arc of kind of my career is testing how long I can hold a person's attention through scrolling through their feed.
Right.
Can you make somebody stop and pay attention to another person and another person's story for 2 or 3 minutes at a time? And, with You, the question was, are we going to be able to have an audience come along on a journey on social media, a medium that is normally reserved for quick hits, and are we going to be able to have somebody stick with somebody for an entire week and follow that person on a journey without losing their attention? And I would be so nervous because, one, we spent so much time on this.
Right.
Like I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. Yeah. Every draft you saw was a lot of pain on my part. My wife, it was so funny when I finally released it. I was like, and everything was going really well. And I was all excited. I was so excited. I was like, this is amazing. And she goes, yeah, I guess I just didn't realize how big of a deal it was because from my viewpoint, it was just a lot of you laying in bed on the computer. You know what I mean?
Well, don't I call you? I can't talk. I'm on the computer.
which is what it was. It was just me struggling in front of a computer screen for so long, trying to make this long-form story. You, the woman of 1,000 stories, what is the story? That was my challenge. Was to take the woman of 1,000 stories and find the story that was going to engage an audience and carry them along on social media over 32 chapters over a period of weeks. And there was, a lot of anxiety over that. My fear was that the first post was going to be great. Oh, Tanqueray's back. That's going to be great. And then the next post was going to have 10% less engagement and 10% less
crazy.
And 10% less. Mm. Yeah, it didn't happen like that at all. It was like as the time went on, people got more and more and more invested. And it was almost like a good TV show where then they would go tell their friends and their friends would go and start from the beginning and then they would catch up to when we got to the last post. There were, millions of people waiting for that last post.
But some of them want you to go further.
Well, that's the thing. And that's, I think, the sign of a story well told. Yeah. The sign of a story well told is a bunch of people screaming at the end, you didn't tell enough. So you talk about how much I changed your life. This was so gratifying and so rewarding for me in so many ways. As an artist, to be able to take that many people on that long of a journey,
I know,
and have them feel what you were feeling, and laugh at the times you were laughing, and be surprised at the times you were surprised, and cry at the times that you were crying, is the ultimate honor as an artist, and the ultimate privilege. I say telling your story was, if not one of the biggest privileges of my life, to be able to kind of hold people's hands and take them on that same journey that I went with you when we were sitting in the diner every single night. Yeah. And, that's where I need to be saying thank you to you, because that's where all your memories, all your experiences, and your voice and your way of telling it. It's like, if I was the soldier, you're the one that gave me all the ammunition and all the arsenal. And that's just like, it's like you are a storyteller's dream in so many different ways. And so, where you kind of talk about the impact that maybe our relationship had on your life materially, for me, it was equally deep and equally gratifying in a creative and an artistic way. That was a huge privilege and a huge honor. And so,
back at you, because you changed my life. I'm not saying that like I said, I still have sadness about Carmine, what happened with that. But even when what's that agency that has the little homeless kids and stuff, even when they came down that day, that made my life. I was so happy that day. I was as happy with those little kids as I was when my son showed up. All the paintings on my wall now that they made for me, the drawings and stuff. And there was one little kid that looked like he was 6 years old, and he kept bringing out paintings because he wanted me to notice him. And then one person gave me because I said I was going to make masks for children, and she heard me tell the lady that's the head of it, and she goes, I want one first. And she went and got me her mother's telephone number. And the other day I called, but she wasn't with her mom. And she called me the other day, and I spoke to her on the phone for about 10 minutes. So I'm sure she went back to the other kids. Yeah, I spoke to Stephanie. But seeing those kids just made my day. It was like a family. And, they all knew my name. And, I have all these pictures in my house, which Paul has seen. There's some we could even put up because there's so many of them.
So that's how our stories affected each other.
Yeah.
That was great.
And you're crazy like me.
And okay. So what is the next question on the list here?
How do you do a good interview?
Hopefully I didn't completely undermine all my credibility by trying to interview you on camera right now. There's a moment even in this interview. I think when we kind of started out, it was.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
You're not intimidating. Do you understand? If somebody walked up to me, I can't say, but intimidating, I would have backed off. You're friendly, you're funny, you smile all the time, so you make people relax.
And I'm gonna play off that because you hit it on the head. Which is, what I was saying is that, there was a time even during this conversation, I think when we first started off, you probably weren't nervous. I was a little nervous. I'd never done this before. But there was a time after we'd been doing it for a few minutes where it just kind of felt like me and you talking. And, I'm not thinking about the cameras or I'm not thinking about anything else. And I think we were both very present. And there was kind of a weight and an energy to that that can only be felt. It can't be described.
Right.
And so,
it can't be faked.
And it can't be faked. Yes. That's huge because, so when you ask what makes a good interview, this is something, I've had to learn because I've been doing it for 10 years. And I've done it like 10,000 times. It's all about the energy of the interview as opposed to having the right questions to ask, because the questions will follow from an energy and it requires complete presence. And my goal, it's a little bit different with me and you because we got to know each other very well. But when I'm approaching somebody on the street, like for the book, or it's a random street interview, my goal is it's more than my goal. It's the requirement that I have for telling the story is to, in a short amount of time, to make this person feel as comfortable as possible. Right. So we can reach that moment of presence and we can reach that moment where that person is completely comfortable with me and I'm completely comfortable with the other person. And it's kind of the place of a great interview is a place of pure listening. It's not where you're thinking about some framework of questions that you're going to ask somebody and some story that you're going to tell. But it's when you're listening to a person so intently that every single question you ask is based on something that they just said. Right. And they are almost leading the interview and you're following them you're following along with your questions and you're calling them out. Right. You're listening so closely, you notice if there's a contradiction. You notice if they're contradicting themselves. And you said when we were talking earlier about how I confronted you. And, I think that's kind of a key word. And it's a strong word. It's an aggressive word, confronting somebody. Right. But, I think that is what somebody might see if they saw me interviewing somebody on the street, is that I will confront people and I will push them to explain themselves and to answer inconsistencies in their story. Right. And while it seems to be something that's kind of aggressive, it's, I think, honoring in a way to people to have somebody listen so intently and take them so seriously that they're going to push them on things, and they're not going to take things for granted at surface level, and they're going to push them to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think that's what I always try to do with an interview, is I always just try to get to that place.
But you're not intimidating. That's part of it too.
I think that's kind of a calmness. People ask, because, one really hard part of my job is getting people to say yes before the interview even starts. Right. Taking this person who doesn't know me. I mean, a lot of people follow Humans in New York City and around the world, but there's times when I'll go to countries and I'll spend 2 weeks there and I'll work through an interpreter where I won't meet a single person who's heard of Humans of New York. And so, my job is in a very short amount of time to take somebody that, is like, who's this guy? Why is he approaching me? That's their initial energy, to kind of getting to that place where we feel comfortable with each other in a very short amount of time. And I think a huge part of that is, people ask, like, how'd you learn to do it? And my answer is, I did it so much that I wasn't nervous anymore.
Right.
And because I wasn't nervous, the person was calmer.
Right.
You know, it's very much like if you can approach a stranger on the street,
Especially in this day and age.
and in the city too,
Yeah, yeah.
and talk with them in the way that I'm talking with you. Not like, oh, excuse me, do you mind if I ask you a question really quickly, please, please? Like, none of that.
Right.
But, you know, excuse me, I was wondering if there's any way that I could ask you a question. I run a photo blog called Humans of New York, and, you know, immediately kind of go to that energy
Right.
where you're at ease. And it's hard to be at ease in the presence of a stranger. It's something you really have to earn, and it's something you really have to do a lot to get to that comfort level. But if you can get to that place, you can make somebody else feel comfortable. And, you know, I think maybe, you know, that's kind of, you know, what you sensed when we were kind of talking, and you kind of realized afterwards that, you know, we were talking about things that I never told anybody before.
Right.
And, you know, I think one of the reasons it was so easy to do that is because we were doing it so calmly and so naturally. You know what I mean? And so, like, when I know an interview is going well, it's never about the questions that I'm asking or the answers that I'm getting. It's about an energy in the room. Yeah. And it was an energy that I felt in this room earlier, you know, and then I knew, okay, the nerves are kind of falling away. The you know, the presence of the camera and in our head and kind of the knowledge of being documented is kind of falling away. And we're getting to a very real place where both of us are present. Right. And I reach that on the street a lot. And that's when I know that, you know, something magic is happening.
Can I say something about before you answer? I was amazed. Australia and all these countries are liking, you know, following me.
Yeah, well, Australia is interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of Australian followers of Humans of New York. Yeah. I think beyond the United States, I think it's the country that
Anyway, how does your process different from when you're working in foreign countries?
So
do you speak the languages? How do you?
Well, that's the main thing. By far the variable that's most different when I travel overseas, and this latest book is a book of my overseas work. The way the process changes the most is through the use of an interpreter. Okay. Which is, it sounds like something simple, but there's actually, you know, a lot of complexity and nuance in the interaction between you, somebody you're interviewing, and the interpreter. And it was something that I had to learn as I went on when I was kind of selecting the interpreter, is that it has, because I mean, we were just talking about what makes a good interview, and we were talking about energy. Right. So you can carry that over into what makes a good interpreter. And really, what allows me to really get to a deep level with somebody who speaks a different language is less about the interpreter's ability to communicate my words, so much so as an interpreter's ability to communicate my energy. Right. And so as time went on and I got better and better at it, I started looking for interpreters, one, who knew the blog. Right. I started selecting from people, I'd post on the blog looking for interpreters, and I started selecting from people who knew the work very well, who loved people, somebody who, if somebody starts crying, they're going to put their hand on their shoulder. You know what I mean? Right. It's like, it's so important for the person doing the interviewing to be feeling the same thing that the person who is being interviewed is feeling, or else they feel stupid. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. If your energy is not, if your emotion or your energy is not being reflected in the person who's interviewing you, then you're going to close up and you're going to feel embarrassed. Right. And so, you know, not only would I need to be reflecting that energy with somebody, but my interpreter would also need to be reflecting that energy. And so, you know, so much of the overseas work is due to the 100 interpreters that I was able to work with, that not only, you know, were excellent and proficient in English, but also, you know, extremely caring and extremely good with people.
Why do you think your stories of people have been so successful on social media?
So, you know, I think and we've talked about this, you know, a lot before. I think, you know, one interesting thing, you know, philosophically about Humans of New York is why is it that it's worked on a platform that first of all, has nothing but other people. It's like social media is nothing but people telling stories about themselves. So why is it that this particular brand of me interviewing people and telling stories about them has stood out so much on social media?
Do you think because with me, a lot of people, like I said, even when I used to talk to people on the street, I've made people feel that they are not alone. And I read a lot of things on your, interviews and stuff that I think people can sort of talk to you about stuff, and then they realize by reading other people's comments that they are not alone, and that's important,
Well,
I think.
there's two reasons. There was like two different versions of you. There was the you that went on the blog and just knocked everybody's socks off with hilarious stories. That was the first version of you. And then there was the version of you in the second story that got much more real and much more deep. And then that's where you're very correct in that, and that's kind of where I was heading, is that, the reason I think Humans of New York stands out on social media is that social media is a collection of people showing their best life, their curated moments to show them at their happiest, their healthiest, and their wealthiest.
Yeah.
And where Humans of New York goes so many times, yesterday I posted a story of a granny wrestling a crocodile, so not always, but where Humans of New York goes a lot is into people's weaknesses and their struggles and their vulnerabilities and their pain. And then that's where it allows people to connect with each other.
Yeah.
Because I think, the things that we brag about and the things that we post the most on social media are actually kind of the things that separate us.
Right.
Look at this car I have. Look at this accomplishment I have that you don't have. Look at this wife I have that you don't have. These kids I have that you don't have. These are things that separate us.
Right.
It's when somebody's talking about their pain or their struggles or their isolations, that's kind of the connective tissue.
Right.
There's a philosopher who said, and I've heard the quote once, and I haven't been able to find it again on Google. I've tried to type it exactly. It was hanging on a teacher's wall in community college when I went to community college, but it says, the beginning of love is to know pain in others. And I think that when people allow themselves these moments of honesty and these moments of candor to let other people know in on their pain, it kind of reaches through whatever gulf there might be in the universe from no matter how many miles they are away from their reader, and bonds them to the person who's reading, who's also shared that same experience. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people get out of the work.
Oh, what do you want your legacy to be?
So it's like, for me, I think my life has gotten to where it makes the most sense to me, and it works the best for me the narrower and narrower I get it. I think when Humans of New York first kind of started taking off, I had a lot of people coming to me and suggesting, oh, why don't you train other photographers and do this in different countries, and you can kind of start an organization and do Humans of around the world, and you can change the world. Like you can make this organization or do this thing that will kind of change the world. And I had this kind of path to go down of do I want to try to change the world, or or do I want to try to tell a story? You know what I mean? And I think the ironically, the more that I focused on nothing else but telling the story, and I don't mean the story of humanity, I don't mean the story of all of us, I mean the story of the next person in front of my face. The more that I focused on that craft and asked myself, how can I be better? Every single day, asking myself, how can I be better at telling the next person's story?
Right.
Ironically, the more impactful Humans of New York has become, and the more that it has had an impact and a change in the world. And so, I think if there's one thing that I want to, for the rest of my life, the arc that I want to continue to follow, or the path that I want to continue to take, is to continue to get as good as possible at telling the next person's story until my story is finished.